Hello everyone, my name is Vladimir and today we're going to talk about quite an interesting topic. We're going to talk about authentic materials and how we can use them in our everyday teaching life.
Хотите постоянно развиваться в преподавании иностранных языков? Школа Дмитрия Никитина проводит образовательные тренинги, конференции и курсы для преподавателей. Подробности о событиях можно узнать по ссылке в описании.
When it comes to authentic materials, there are quite a few things that we know about them. Technically speaking, authentic materials can be pretty much anything, right? It can be a text, for example, a novel that we read, or it can be an article, it can be a video, it can be a movie, it can be a podcast. You know what? It can be even a recipe. Pretty much anything that was created for real life context is authentic materials. And nowadays, we try to employ them as much as possible in our class because it is only authentic materials that bring genuine language into the classroom. They usually show different cultural nuances and communication styles, and they do that much better than a raw course book material. An interesting thing about authentic materials also lies in the fact that even though there are a lot of them, and sometimes it might be difficult to find the best source, we still need to bring them into the class because it is impossible to show the real world of the English language without them. By this, I mean several things. When we teach advanced students, and especially advanced students, sooner or later, they will grab a lot of language. And by a lot of language, I mean dozens of words and hundreds of idioms. I don't know, a lot of different phrasal verbs. And here's a catch. When we learn a phrase from a book, we usually do not understand how this phrase can be used properly in real life context. And here's a story about that. Real life story happened to me a couple of years ago. I myself like working with in use series. I think that everyone knows that series of vocabulary items. There will be vocabulary in use, collocations in use, idioms in use, you name it. So a couple of years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who is a native speaker, and I used an expression that I learned from one of the books that I just mentioned. It was a house of many doors. To my surprise, my friend did not understand this phrase. So, of course, I was shocked because back then I was still in the illusion that a native speaker knows everything. So after the meeting, I started Googling the phrase. I started looking for different contexts where the phrase actually could be used. So unlike my expectations, the phrase was not, in fact, very common because even though it may sound funny, that's why I decided to add this picture of this cartoon. In fact, it's a prison. And I found only one example on phrases where this phrase was used. And on English, there were just a few. So here comes a question. When we learn the phrase or when we learn the vocabulary from different kinds of books, do we really show the language or we show the vocabulary? And when we think about it, inevitably will we understand that by one book, we always give our students limited exposure to the language. Let us just consider the facts. A modern course book, let's say expert proficiency, comprises of 150 pages, right? That's a lot of pages. Then we have 100 for the workbook, 100 for the additional materials. So overall, they're going to be about 500 pages of language. And even though it may sound impressive, technically speaking, it's just 500 pages of the language, which is even less than the script for a modern movie. So you can imagine you spent a year with your student preparing them for this or that exam, be it IELTS or Cambridge, but overall what you gave them is just one movie. Of course, it's not enough. And of course, it will result in some dangerous even situations in the future. Another problem with using just a textbook lies in the fact that, after all, we will inevitably see one-sided approach to selecting the language that should be taught. Of course, the course writers, they will try to find the best materials possible, but since it is always biased, we cannot guarantee that the language that they chose is as accurate that should be out there. And an example with the prison that I shared with you a couple of minutes ago actually proves it, because the phrase is in fact in the book, and it is not just in any book. It is in a book that is considered to be one of the best on the market to teach advanced vocabulary. So it means that the author of the book knows the expression, perhaps uses the expression, but in fact it is not very common. Here, I would even add that we like criticizing Runglish, right? That is the Russian version of the English language that appeared because of lack of the exposure. So everyone is familiar with words like, I don't know, home task, that does not really exist in the English language, or weird collocations such as go in for sports, that is, well, it's really difficult to see this phrase used in the English language, even though it is, in fact, in the dictionary. So when we just try to use one book, we will create a situation that where instead of using Runglish, we create a new sort of language that is, let's say, Ronish, Christinish, Bobish, you name it. And even though they're not going to be any sort of real mistakes in the book, the mere fact that we rob our students of the real language, that it is out there, is a crime. Why is it a crime, you may ask? Simply because it will inevitably create artificial usage of the English language. What is artificial? We teach our students to use different sorts of dictionaries, right? We use them to use a monolingual dictionary such as Oxford or Longman or Cambridge. Every teacher has their own preferences. When it comes to high levels, we usually teach them how to use a collocation dictionary. We teach them how to use different materials such as Phrase-it or Ludwig, or we introduce them to different kinds of corpora that are abundant out there. At the same time, we need to understand the simple truth about most of these materials that are out there. We usually see just one sentence, and one sentence is never enough to understand how the word should be used. A collocation is never enough to understand whether it is stylistically neutral or it is not. Of course, some dictionaries give us some guidance towards the style and the register of this or that word, but not all of the words can be marked this way. When we help them with different sources, we help them understand that there is a collocation. It might have different kinds of meanings out there. And even though the student will do all of these things that we ask them to do, higher level students, especially students who prepare for exams such as CE or proficiency, or those who want to get band 8 or 9 in IELTS, inevitably will fall into a trap of using weird language. So here we have a text that I would call a masterpiece of the advanced English language, because if you look at it, you will see that there are not that many simple words in this text, right? We have when it comes to simple words, we have his, or the, or and. All the other words that we have in this slide, they are purely advanced, right? They are more than advanced. So you can take a moment and read it yourself, and I will just briefly read it for you. So we have the text that goes like that. Panned in diminutive primates, bouncing onwards the birth, the singular tumbled and wagged his capitulum. The dowager summoned the quack, and the quack declared, defunct primates bouncing onward the birth. An interesting thing that you perhaps have noticed about this text, even though technically speaking, the text is grammatically correct, most of the words that we have here, in fact, collocate, and they were used in different sources this way, because I checked. The text does not sound natural at all. I don't really think that you can meet this text out there in any context, because in fact, the original text is different. It is a nursery rhyme, and most of the children out there know it. So instead of working with the language and teaching words from the actual book, where we don't really see how the phrases and words are used, we need to understand that out there, with the usage of real materials, authentic materials, we can show a real language and how it changes in everyday life.
Хотите постоянно развиваться в преподавании иностранных языков? Школа Дмитрия Никитина проводит образовательные тренинги, конференции и курсы для преподавателей. Подробности о событиях можно узнать по ссылке в описании.
Lots of teachers out there may ask a simple question. The texts out there or videos out there are not very easy. It is not, in fact, very easy for intermediate candidates or for an FC level candidate. So how can I work with the text if my student does not understand it? That's a valid point. Of course, after all, our pure aim as English teachers is to guide the students and help them reach their goals, especially when it comes to exam preparation. Most of the students who prepare for the exams, they have a final goal. They need to have a certificate. I think that if we prepare them only for the certificate and teach them how to tick boxes, we, in fact, do not help them. We ruin their expertise in the future, because yes, they will get the certificate, but the certificate will not mean anything without clear understanding how the real language works. So what can be done with a text that perhaps is more difficult for your student than it should be? There is a mere guidance for that, and it has been explored a lot by different authors out there. And the strategy for such an approach is simple. Instead of grading the text, that is making it less difficult, less intimidating for our students, and more understandable, we should grade the task. Because even with lower level students, such as intermediates or pre-intermediates or even beginners, we can bring some realia to the class, and they will understand what that realia means by the simple graded task. For example, with, let's say, A2 level candidates, we can bring a recipe when we cover the topic of food. right? And they will see all of those words and they will see how they are used in everyday life. And then in the future, if they are to watch a show, a culinary show out there, or they will look through some materials on the same topic, they will understand how the language works in this or that context. With higher levels, such as a C or proficiency, we will have to use the real language because it will inevitably help our students, not only with reading, that is obvious, of course, or listening. We also can teach them how to go through the exam format tasks. For example, here we have an article. That's a relatively new article. I found it on the 10th of July, and it is about the usage of plastic and its effect on our life. So quite a common topic. I'm pretty sure that pretty much every teacher out there has once in their lifetime taught the topic of environment. And this is a common topic in various exams out there. So what can be done with just these 3 paragraphs? I will show you what we can do with this text to create various use of English materials, reading materials, or even speaking materials. So without further ado, let's just look at it. So here I took just first 2 paragraphs because it's more than enough. And I took some of the functional language from it to create a use of English open class task. Open class is the activity where they test grammar mainly, not vocabulary, even though some common expressions can be tested as well. But namely, it's grammar. So by just giving them a short text, making them read this text and then just taking out some of the words, we quickly create a brand new activity that they will be happy to deal with. And actually, with these types of tasks, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. It will be quite erroneous, I think, to ask them to read an article that consists of several pages in the class, because it will kill a lot of precious time when you see your students. So you can ask them to read and work with the text at home. And when the students return, you can give them a task like this. So by this, they will see that you are actually checking homework. You care about the things that they were doing at home, and they will start paying attention to grammar patterns. This is one of the big problems with higher level students. They love underlining big words. So when they read a text and they see the text like this, they will definitely underline difficult words like C1 or C2 level words, but they will never underline words like it or them and so on. However, when they start paying attention to smaller words in the real text out there, they quickly learn how to deal with use of English tasks. The same goes with word formation. You can easily create a task like this with a word formation that is taking words that were derived from smaller words. When you do that, our students show progress very quickly. Another thing that can be easily done would be reading, as I mentioned. And reading, as we know, is just an ocean of different opportunities for a teacher. It's just the world is your oyster. You can do pretty much anything with reading. Here, I'd like you to look at the slide. As you see, we have some of the sentences or parts of the sentences that were taken from the original text, and then they were paraphrased. Usually we see this task in a slightly different manner in the books. They ask us to find synonyms to a word. As we know, a synonym is not always the best choice to work with the vocabulary, simply because a synonym may kill the precision of this or that vocabulary item. However, when we talk about either collocations or parts of the sentences or full sentences, we see a bigger picture. So by this simple activity, we teach them several things. First, of course, we see whether they understand some phrases from the text. Also, we prepare them for reading part 7 in proficiency or part 8 in CPE, where they need to find the sentences that were paraphrased in 4 or 5 different texts. And last but not least, we also help them to deal with the keyword transformation, because in essence, we teach them how to paraphrase. A lot of people think that that's it, but technically speaking, we can practice writing this way also, because here, as you see, we have 4 sentences, and I made those 4 sentences as a teacher for the students. You can also ask your students to write the sentences themselves. So let's say Masha writes 5 sentences, Kostya writes 5 sentences, and then they swap. And they will need to find those sentences in the original text. So this way, we're not really working with a boring text that might be there in the book. We create an additional quick material. It's very important that we have something that will not kill a lot of time. And by this, we are not just practicing the language itself, we are also preparing for the exam, employing and teaching important strategies, how to deal with this or that task.
Хотите постоянно развиваться в преподавании иностранных языков? Школа Дмитрия Никитина проводит образовательные тренинги, конференции и курсы для преподавателей. Подробности о событиях можно узнать по ссылке в описании.
Any task out there, as we know, can be easily transformed into a speaking task. And as for the speaking, you can do pretty much anything. I myself like adding some pictures to the text, because Cambridge likes pictures, and I myself teach for Cambridge a lot. So here what we see, we have 2 pictures, and we prepared 4 different questions that will make students use the vocabulary from the text. We usually even do it in a slightly different manner. We first give them the pictures and tell them that these pictures were used to illustrate the article that they read, and they need to say whether these pictures illustrate the article the way it should be illustrated. Maybe a student can introduce or suggest another picture that will do the job better. By this, we not only help our students use the target vocabulary, we'll also make them use some of the abstract language that is considered to be of higher levels. And as for the questions, it depends. For example, here we have 4 different questions, and those who are familiar with the CE formats understand that we can just give these pictures to 2 different students and ask them to compare and contrast the pictures using the questions that are given here. If it is a proficiency level class, we can just ask 1 question and talk about the efficiency of the usage of these pictures and adding some pictures to the list. By this, we still inevitably return to the text again and again. And a funny fact is that this knowledge does not come from you as a teacher, because we as teachers like just storming, like pouring our students with different words. This time, we're not doing a thing. The text does for us. And it can be not just the text, it can be pretty much anything. A podcast, for instance, can do the same trick. So looking back at all of the things that we have discussed here, we understand that there are quite a few advantages to using authentic materials to the class. And while enumerating all of those benefits, I'd like to start with the one that will please most of the teachers, because we like thinking about our students and we always put our students first, but at the same time, we sometimes forget about ourselves as individuals. So with authentic materials out there, we get access to practically unlimited number of sources. And all of those sources may suit any topic and any lesson aim. It happens quite often that you prepare a class and you want to practice, let's say, keyword transformation, but the book doesn't give you a nice task where you can do that. So you can create your own task using a short article out there. Sometimes the materials in the book, they are connected to the topic that you are discussing, but you feel that your students are interested in something else. So why not ask them to bring their own article to the class, and then you can quickly compile a task out of them. By this, and by encouraging your students to read more, to explore more, to do more, you add exposure to the real English that is beyond the course book. As we discussed at the very beginning, even with the best book out there, it's simply nothing compared to what we have out there and what is awaiting for us as language learners. By this, we also help our students use the language the right way, so that when they reach higher levels, such as C1 and C2, they do not sound artificial, because they will inevitably sound natural with the vocabulary items or grammar patterns that they choose. And last but not least, that would be part of the emotional intelligence, I think. Our aim as English teachers is to teach language first. Students who prepare for the exams, sometimes they do not really care much about the language because they have a goal, a piece of paper with a grade on in it. That is why they don't really like learning the language. They like doing the tasks themselves. And even though it may serve the purpose, at the same time, it is a double-edged sword, because they may fall into trap of doing the task in an excellent way, and then they won't be able to use this knowledge in the real world. So providing test-taking strategies can be easily employed into using authentic materials. And by this, they enrich their vocabulary, they enrich their exposure to the language, and they become confident speakers. So if you want to discuss this topic any further with me in the future, so please feel free to contact me. So here in the slide, we can see my contacts, my email, or the community. So please reach out. I will be happy to discuss this topic with you in detail.